Here we go, y'all. The show you're hearing today is our ElkBros Live question and answer show. We talk about late elk season thoughts and strategies, answer questions from our ElkBros Instagram followers, and we answer questions and interact with our live ElkBros YouTube channel audience. So get ready, y'all. Questions are locked and loaded, and Joe's sweating like an overdressed summer hiker in H-Town, y'all. Why? 'Cause, y'all, we have the entire crew in the house, and we're live. So, my friends, pull up a chair, adjust your volumes just right, and welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host Gilbert Ornelas and elk hunting coach Joe Gillia. You want to hunt elk? They live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Hello there, everyone. If it's your first time with us, glad to have you. Hope you enjoy our show. And as always, for those blue collar hunters following our show and grinding it out with us every week, welcome back to Elk Camp. I'm Gilbert Ornelas, the host of your show, and we have got a full crew here tonight, y'all. From Katy, Texas, that's right, we've got the leader of the Venezuelan Mafia in the house, Mr. Luis Gonzalez with a Z, right, Joe?
Right.
And from Katy and from Dallas, Fort Worth, we've got Manano Graterón, the leader of the Venezuelan Mafia of the North, right? And from Cuesta, New Mexico, we've got the legend in the house, Mr. R.C. Knox. And from Cimarron, New Mexico, we've got your elk hunting coaches in the house, Mr. Leroy, the Ninja Chavez, and WWJGD is in the house. What would Joe Gillia do? And y'all, we are live tonight on YouTube. Welcome, everyone. So glad everybody's here. We're going to get this thing kicked off and send it right over here to Joe to get us started.
Well, we just want to welcome everybody tonight, man. Love having everybody. So glad that you guys are here. Welcome to our elk camp. We want you to feel right at home. We'll talk a little bit more about the structure of this and how everything's going. But, first of all, I keep hearing that, it's Luis Gonzalez with and I want y'all to know that it's really an SH on the end. He's, he says he's Venezuelan. It's actually Polish. He has
like a real blood in Spain.
It's Gonzalez.
Gonzalez. Oh.
Yeah, it's Gonzalez, man.
Yeah, so, see how this goes. I mean, the guy can't freaking spell, and now it just turns it around and makes it about me. Man, come on. Hey, by the way, I got to say something. I just want everybody to know that, there's always been that nonsense debate about the leader of the Venezuelan mafia. Everybody knows who it is. But I just want to say something real quick. In the last episode, I did not participate. Okay, I decided I just couldn't make it, right? But Manano happened to confess in that episode, his own voice, that he was the lowest ranking member of this group.
This is true.
Well, on that particular episode.
Whoa. So hear it out.
Because you weren't there.
Member of this group.
So
he just confessed to everybody that he was the lowest member of the crew. It's recorded, Manano. That's okay.
English, bro.
I get it that you're trying to put a facade in front of when I'm present, but I know that you know who the true leader of the Venezuelan mafia is. So thank you. I dropped the mic. Can I disconnect now?
I dropped the mic.
No, but I'm gonna clear it up. I'm gonna clear it up though, Luis. I want to agree with you, Luis, because I will just say this. The leader of the Venezuelan mafia was not on our last podcast.
That's true, but he is on this one.
I wasn't on last week.
Here we go.
I mean, you really. You didn't hear the memo about the leadership of the Venezuelan mafia.
Right.
The first requirement is a
It's gotta be
Venezuelan passport.
Venezuelan.
You don't have one, bro.
Yeah.
Yep. So we got a lot of things already hitting from viewers here that we're going to get to in a few minutes here. So Gilbert,
Yeah, y'all,
rock this forward.
to get us started, we're going to give some quick shout outs to our top listening cities this week, Joe. So for our live audience, do us a favor and tell us where you're from too, please.
yeah, let everybody know, man. Let everybody know where you guys are from, where you're signing in from. Luis,
Up first, shout out to the garden spot on the northern bank of the Minnesota River, Eden Prairie, Minnesota.
Eden Prairie, Minnesota. That was
Minnesota's
number
nice.
5 on the list this week, y'all. That's number 5, Eden
Awesome.
Prairie, Minnesota, the garden spot of Minnesota.
Okay, next, a shout out to the once named Hufftown, along with all 8 wards and the folks of Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, Greensburg. In fact, Jason Schultz, you were shooting me some photos. God, it was only probably a week ago in Pennsylvania of this elk herd, and I mean, and he actually had a T-shirt on at the time there. So, man, Pennsylvania and the elk. I'm anxious. I'd really like to see how that's going to turn out.
I have to say, I was really surprised that this next top listening city is a spring training home of the Texas Ranger and Kansas City Royals. Surprise, Arizona.
So what are you saying, Manano?
Surprise.
Surprise.
It's a surprise.
Who's surprise?
Surprise. Yeah.
It's a surprise.
Of a suck.
Surprise,
Surprise, Arizona.
Surprise.
Yeah,
Arizona.
there we go. I thought he was trying to surprise us. Yeah, Texas Rangers and Kansas City Royals in Surprise, Arizona, man. What a cool name.
Yes. It is.
Yeah.
So 75 years ago, my next city, after 133, you guys could appreciate this. After 133 failed drillings, one oil strike changed this once little town, Alberta, and Canada's history forever. Now, y'all might have to help me out with this because I don't know if it's pronounced in French or is it Leduc?
Leduc.
Yeah. Leduc, Alberta, Canada.
Badass, Joe. They're in the house.
Yeah.
Our brothers to the
Canada's in
north.
house, man.
C'est très
And
difficile,
our
man.
top listening city, Gilbert.
Yeah, our top listening city, making it this week, a huge ElkBros shout out to the home of the world's largest pecan, ironically, once called Walnut Springs, the locally invented limecrete as well, and they resulted in this little small town having the largest concentration of concrete buildings in the entire country. In Seguin, Texas, y'all. Seguin, just outside of San Antonio on I-10.
Yeah, that's freaking
sir.
awesome, man. And let's yell out some of these. We've got Jason Schultz coming in from Salem, Connecticut. Mike
Yes,
Middleton
sir.
from Howittsville, Texas. Tracy Henry, Twin Falls, Idaho. Any place else y'all see?
Jonathan Scott, Twin Falls, Idaho.
All right. Jonathan, what up, buddy?
Jens Broughton, Albuquerque, New
Albuquerque.
Mexico.
The 505 shows up, Joe.
Jeremy from Northern Colorado. Man, Chris
Ebot
McKelvey
from New Orleans.
Mike Bozart's in the house.
Guys, we want to
Salem,
welcome
Connecticut.
everybody. And so what I'm going to do is just so all you guys know how this is going to work, you feel free to ask us any questions during the show through your chat, just like you're doing. These guys will be checking on things and jotting them down, making sure we bring them up if we don't see it right away. In between questions, one thing that we're going to talk about, our main topic tonight, is on late season elk thoughts and strategies, because I've had a lot of people been contacting me that are heading out right now. And I think we just had up, I think Matt Flowers was saying that late archery elk season opens next week, going to be a different ball game for me. Any tip, guys? So this is right up your alley, Matt. And yes, food. So Matt, are you hunting bulls? You hunting cows? You hunting any elk? Make sure you pop that in to let us know what you're hunting there. All right. And so also, so that you guys know, one important note is that there is a delay from us to you. So please be patient. Sometimes we respond and it takes a little bit before we actually get to see you guys respond back to us. Okay. So we will also have questions. We have some great questions. In fact, I got to throw one out right away just to start things off, man. And I think we kind of hit this a little bit, but Armando Martinez from the Bow Hitch said, guys, can you guys put subtitles on the podcast so we can see what the heck Luis is saying?
That's funny, man.
Yeah. Well, the problem is Banano has been so absent of the podcast, he has no idea
Did you hear
what
that,
it is
Joe?
like when Manano's on.
Did you hear that? The problem. He sounds like Arabic or you know, from India.
So Matt, it looks to me like you're hunting in Oregon and coastal Washington, right? Clear cut country. Yeah. So a little bit more different than the situation we're dealing with. That brings a whole new brings something really new to the whole play there, because for you guys there, I don't know how much weather becomes a factor for what you do. At this time of year, I'm not sure if you guys are getting snow, if it's moving down, how those animals have changed up, but definitely, you know, you're going to want to be able to be, you know, when you say feed, absolutely. Now, the difference between that though is, and when we talk about elk being elk, and that's one thing that we're going to talk about in this late season strategies, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more, especially like mountainous areas in our area and stuff like that. But for your question is, your bulls should have split off already. Now your small bulls, some of your small bulls will stay with the herd, and that's where you're looking at for a branch or a cow. So you're definitely going to be looking, you're not having to look for those big boys that are splitting off and just wanting to stay alone and away from everything and find their holes. You're looking for those critters that are actually staying in the herd or on the side of the herd and going to those feed areas. So you're playing it right and you're thinking right about that. Now, as far as, you know, I think in your country, because of the moisture and everything like that, you don't get dry and crunchy, do you? Because if you don't, you're still in great stocking situation. But what I would do at this time of year is, because you have that clear cut, is I would use every road possible. I would use every area that I could glass as possible. I would cover as much country as possible and try to locate where those critters are coming out, because now they are becoming habitual again. Unless somebody really is busting them up from their feed area to their bedding area, they're going to kind of do that routine unless they get moved. So once you start locating where they want to be for their feed, they're going to want to be there. So if you saw them go up in the morning, look for them to come out. And RC taught me this a long time ago, man. If you don't go booger some of these critters and you don't want to go up there and necessarily get in where they're at when they're doing a routine, then you can go ahead and wait for them and be in the area where they're most likely going to come out. That's the advice I would give you for that. Anybody else?
Joe, just real quick, I saw one of our coaches is in with us as well. The silver-tongued devil himself, Mr. Guy Duplantier, is in the house. I told him to go ahead and come on in with us. So if you see him,
absolutely,
come up with us, let him in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Big GD, come on in, man.
Big GD.
Love to have you, man.
Personal goal for improvement next season? Yeah. Be really, I mean, far away from Luis.
Far away.
I will definitely improve my hunt.
I tell you what,
If you
man,
do that.
I'm pretty proud of my son too. He's been really killing it with the calling. So
Yeah, he's good.
if we can get him in camp next year, he's going to be a pretty
That's gonna
awesome
be my
caller.
partner. That's gonna be my
It's
hunt
going to be
partner.
Manano says it's going to be my partner.
Oh man.
Yeah, he always needs somebody to call for him. So yeah, the husband is a partner for you.
So we got a question from Silvano Munoz.
Yes.
Says next year will be his first season ever going after elk and with a bow. Says, what do you think is as a newbie hunter? Should I really focus on learning the calls?
Is he going bow hunting, brother?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's archery hunting next year. So he's looking at hunting in
for sure.
September.
Calling's going to be the number one thing that you need to get on, brother.
Oh, absolutely. That's the game changer, Silvano, man. That is what's going to change the situation from you having to have an elk, from you having to find an elk, from elk finding you. You know, when you just leave it up to chance of you having to find an elk by a chance happening through hiking and hoping that you're in the right area, or being in an area where there are elk and bringing those elk to you. So that's a much better situation. It's always going to be about the language, bud. And the other thing is, I'd tell you is learning to hunt fearlessly.
Yeah,
You know, because
that's right.
you
Take a
want
look
that
at what our
call.
boy Adam did. I mean, just fearless, walked up in there in the woods by himself, didn't know really, as my grandpa would say, shit from wild honey, but he went straight up in there and went hunting. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, I mean, made elk sounds, and here you go. The guy's calling for help, getting elk out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, when I say hunt fearlessly, man, what I mean by that a lot of times is, and I see it all the time. I see it in guys that I'm around. I see it in other guys that are hunting out of there, but they're going to actually sometimes not go into areas because they worry about getting back to camp by, let's say, midday, or they're heading back to get to the vehicle like an hour before dark because they're worried about not making it back to the vehicle. Those types of things actually take away some of the best hunting times for you. So that's something for you to think about, man, that will help you out a lot there. But definitely, I'm going to tell you the difference is going to be the calls, man. That's going to be the game changer.
Yeah.
Because that is why I feel I've been so successful over the years. And you look at each of these guys as they become more and more successful, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, we had some guys in camp that hunted with us on our ElkBros adventure hunts where we're coached. One of them was Mr. Larry Gill, and after spending a full, 7 to 10 days with us, Joe, he actually went back up to New Mexico with what he'd learned with us and actually called in a bull for his brother. I don't know if his brother-in-law or his cousin or his buddy, but I mean a giant bull. He called him in for the guy. So happy for Mr. Gill and what he took away from us and went and put that out there. I mean, he got right back on the horse, So it was fun to see from Mr. Gill's standpoint.
Pretty pumped. I talked to him afterwards as well, and he was very excited about, being able to do that. So it just must feel so good, right? Be able to call in an elk for somebody else. It's definitely one of my my items in my bucket list.
And we actually have a scenario from one of our Instagram questioners that you might really be interested in, Silvano, because and I hope I'm saying that right, man. But he has a question that really goes towards solo hunting, and you're talking about being by yourself, and that kind of adds a little bit something to the game as well. So we're going to talk about that. So we'll be having that come up here in a few minutes as well. But I wanted to say hello to the brother, Guy Duplantier.
There he is,
Guy with
the
the
silver-tongued devil himself, the Cali transplant.
Guy.
How we doing, gents?
What's going on, my brother?
I was just sitting there enjoying it on the couch. Your Gil's like,
Couldn't
"Get on
see
there."
it. Couldn't see it. I said, man, we got to have our elk hunting coach in the house with us, man.
I was laughing because Luis he just stepped up to the plate and was like, and had it on recording. I'm like,
Hey, already.
no, like, dude, you gotta come prepared.
That's when you're, when you're prepared, you're prepared. You know what I mean?
I'm tired, bro. I'm tired of this.
I'm tired of
RC, what's up, brother?
Yeah.
How's the YouTube world going with these folks here? Oh, we got Meeker, Paul Perky out of Meeker. That's a few minutes away from me. What's up, Paul?
28 of them lined up in there right now, baby.
Yeah. So I know Sil. He just asked those questions, and Sil was actually supposed to go with me a couple of seasons. So he don't have no excuses, man. He should be so far up on his elk calling knowledge and game. Still, I'm gonna call you out on it, bro, because there's no reason to be behind the curve.
Yeah, look, Sil, I mean, go to our base camp, dude. I'm not making a shameless plug for it, but I am.
He knows.
At the end of the day, man, get to that base camp. It'll help you with your calling strategies. You know, there's other things out there that can really help you. Paul Medell's Elk Nut app. I mean, you name it. I mean, these guys speak the language. It's the most important part of it. I got to hunt with some unbelievable guys this year and do some elk calling. I mean, I got to hunt with that silver-tongued devil down there below. I mean, we had an absolute blast together, calling elk and helping guys get better every day in the I got better every day in the woods, right?
Look at Sil said all crap. Sorry,
what?
Gil. Sil said all crap.
Yeah. Done got called out and
Hey,
everything.
you best not step in the ring if you don't want it.
Exactly.
Hey, Silvano, you said that you will be hunting with somebody. Yeah, he's a fellow Californian. Oh no, man.
A Messner's in the house.
He
But,
better get up on it because we ain't playing that mess.
but it does change the game, man. Silvano, it does change the game if you have two guys, if you've got a partner out there. But listen to me and make sure, I wish your partner was here. I don't know if he is or not. And anybody out there that has a hunting partner, look, y'all, it is just as important. Don't be the only person in that too that gets good at calling and understanding and learning. Share that knowledge. Insist on your partner sharing the journey with you. If not, there's a little bit of selfishness going on there, man, because, you know, one person's going to call for one can call for the other. And when you become a team like that, it is sweet. It becomes so tight. You have some great encounters happening, one person batting for the other, one person pitching for the other. But that calling, understanding that language, being able to understand how to respond to the situations, when not to call, you know, when sometimes you got to use other aspects, that's critical. So any of you guys that have a partner, man, whatever you're learning, wherever you're going, wherever you're grabbing it from, send that to your partner. Help them to help you. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, every day when we hunt, we're only as good as our weakest link. And sometimes I'm that weakest link, man. You know, there's a lot of things I got to get better at. I mean, conditioning, you know, all of those things go hand in hand. You know, we encountered some of the most crazy blowdown this year, and being able to navigate all of that and understand the elk patterns that changed when all of that happened. That was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. The traffic that we endured, I mean, it was nuts. So yeah, I mean, all of those things go into you having a better hunt and being more prepared. But I would say that, like Joe has said 1,000 times, if you can speak the language, you're a leg up on everybody.
So boys, as you see things, man, a question to somebody that we haven't got up, just jump up with it. And we'll work on answering as quick as possible. I'll try throwing some of these other questions in between,
Sure.
as we go as well. Okay.
Okay, there was a question earlier. Somebody wanted to know if anybody noticed a variance in arrow trajectory at altitude, 9,500 to 11,000, I guess.
Yeah.
And that was from Bullet 225 HO. So if Luis can handle that question.
No, I responded to him in the chat, but I think all of us can handle that question, right? I mean, it's I put yes, sir. Always good to shoot a few at camp before the hunt,
Every
right?
day. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, for several reasons. Yeah, altitude may have something to do with it, but you know, it's always good to you know, shoot a few at camp just to make sure your equipment is functioning properly prior to your hunt. Now, Beto has a great story to tell about what happened to him this year on that, and it had nothing to do with altitude. But Beto, go ahead, sir.
We took a horrible ass whipping hiking out of a spot the night before, and I had to actually place my dadgum bow on my backpack. And you know, several times I fell, and when I fell, I rolled over on my back to try to keep myself from going all the way down the freaking mountain. So my bow took a horrible ass whipping, right? And I'm telling you, when I got back to camp, Guy and Joe and all of them can attest, I was whipped, man. And the next day, I knew I needed to shoot my bow to make sure everything was right. And I don't know, we kind of got behind the gun, and I kind of procrastinated and didn't do it and went, oh, well, I'll take one of my what do you call those arrows that we carry with the judo point, and I'll shoot it when I'm out there. Yeah, well,
I'm sorry, Beto. I'm sorry, Beto. I just picturing my mind. You rolling down the mountain with
shit, dude. It was literally inches away from that happen, right? Yeah, that'd have sucked because we went up a long way to go all the way back down.
Bro, I love you, Beto. You know
those
that.
big boulders were not kind to my sight, right? So when I got to my hunting area, me and Larry Gill, I was actually calling for Larry. And I look up and I got a mule deer tag in my pocket. Okay. And the elusive mule deer has kind of like been a lot of elk for a lot of people, for me, right? The elusive mule deer has escaped me. And most of it's because of my own fault. The first time it was because I didn't know that you could shoot with your 20-yard pin 40 yards straight down the mountain, right? So I shot him for 31, used my 30-yard pin and slapped him across the top of the back. This was 15 or 13 years ago. But I get this giant mule deer in front of us. Guy Duplantier had already seen him the day before, so we knew what area he was in. And I get this big old mule deer, probably 155 to 160 inch mule deer in front of me, and he doesn't even know I'm there. I got him, man. Like I'm going, oh, I can't believe this. They don't even know I'm here. And it doesn't matter how far he is because I'm going to get him, right? So he walks out at 55 yards, walk in the park, draw the bow, send it, and man, it looks like it's going to be 30 feet over him. I'm like, what in the world? And it barely misses him by about that much. I mean, a couple inches, just sails right over these withers. It hit him right between both shoulders, and it stuck into a stump behind him. Well, he kind of was like, what was that? You know, he didn't really know where it was coming from. So I was grabbing me another arrow, trying to snatch it up, and I look to my left, and about 30 yards from me, there's another like 4x4, smaller one, and he picks the movement up, and he busts out of there, and they all bust out of there. Well, I get back to camp, and my bow is shooting. The first time I shot it at 55 yards, I shot it over the target. It was about 9.5, 10 inches high. So what I can tell you guys is if you've gone through a pretty good hike and you've thrown your bow in the back of the mule or whatever it may be, and it's been beat around a little bit, man, shoot it a few times. You know, it cost me an awesome opportunity at a really big mule deer because I procrastinated and I was lazy. And that's just something I'm not proud of, but really something I want to relay to everybody and let them know that even if you don't think that you need to, probably a good idea to do it.
Look, man, you're traveling, right? I mean, for us, we go to New Mexico from here, takes us 12, 13 hours. Even though you have those bows and cases, they bang around as you travel. You get up there, you want to check your equipment. You want to make sure nothing has moved. Or, one of the things that happened to me, similar to what happened to Beto, was I had a soft case because I thought it was easier to transport my bow like that on my four-wheeler. And, it turns out that the banging on the four-wheeler, and that soft case wasn't really protecting the bow, and it was the sight was hitting up and down on the four-wheeler top, and it moved my sight. So I almost had a similar issue to what Beto had. So definitely always check your equipment, and then also make sure you protect your bow when you're traveling with it. Make sure it's very well protected, has a good case. We pay a lot of money on a bow, on the arrows and everything, and then we try to just kind of save some bucks on a good case. And at the end of the day,
that's what protects your equipment.
I've actually had a bow blow up in my hands because I used to travel without a case, and all it took was a little bit of mud, about that much mud, got into the groove on my pulley and went to pull back, and it rolled it right off and ended up blowing up in my hands. And I'll tell you this too about shooting, the difference in your arrow flight at altitude. I get a lot of people when they come to the ranch I guide at, they are required to shoot prior to going out. They actually have a proficiency test for guys there. And when guys first come out and start shooting, a lot of these guys for some reason are generally low and to the left. Now, I think that has to do with form. I think when people haven't been staying in shooting and a lot of times they're doing their traveling and then they pull their bows out, and you think about when you're pulling and you're trying to use muscles that you haven't used in a while, it's generally where you're going to drop and you're pulling and you're generally going to be to that left. So it could be a form thing, but I've also
My
had
bow
guys
shoots high every time I leave
Yeah.
here, Joe. When
What's
I
that?
get to the mountain, my bow's going to be 2 or 3 inches high. And it's
Yeah.
just the way it is every year. And I know that. So I shoot, make the little adjustment when I'm at camp. And generally, couple inches ain't going to make or break you. But sometimes it can, just depending on what you're shooting at. If you're shooting at prairie dogs or whatever, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah,
But
and Mr.
Go ahead,
Jeremy
Guy.
Jorgensen is actually saying something there. My bow is sensitive to extreme temperatures too, probably because it's cheap. Not because it's cheap. Every bow is sensitive
Every
to
bow
temperatures,
is,
and I can
yes,
tell you
it
this:
is.
arrows are as well. And
Yes.
I just kind of learned that the hard way too. I mean, we had some extremely hot summers here, and I moved my arrows. Actually, my bows. Talking to Beto, I moved my bows out of the garage and put them inside the house.
The heat's worse for the limbs.
Well, I mean, if y'all remember, the kid Kirkpatrick had an issue with his string too, where it got really hot and his strings got loose, and he kind of lost poundage
Right. It'll
on
start
his.
stretching. Yeah.
And then I use hot melt for my inserts on my arrows. So I've also noticed that some of those inserts get loose when there are extreme temperatures right there inside the garage as well. So yes, I mean, extreme heat, extreme cold could affect your equipment. So better to keep them inside the house if possible.
So I got a couple things on that, guys. If you're running a dovetail sight, if you're traveling, pull that dovetail off. It's not going to hurt your pins.
Point.
Slide it off, put it on, in its own case. It's not getting bounced around. Add a little protection. And secondly, Luis, stop using hot melt and please use a polymer or rubberized glue for those inserts, as it is better for temperatures.
It is better for temperatures, but with the hot melt, I have a lot more flexibility as far as, swapping
right.
equipment and swapping inserts and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you build them right the first time, then
Yeah.
that's my expectation.
Take that.
What happens is my nano breaks the arrows and then he wants to
And you
use
gotta
an
go-
insert on another arrow. So I have to, pull the insert out and then
Pull it
use
out.
it on another arrow because he's cheap.
And then,
I'm
you're
gonna
talking
throw-
about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jojo.
I'm going to throw this out before we start taking some more questions so we know where we're going to go with this. But on our late season elk hunting, I get a whole bunch of questions all the time, especially this time of year. And we've got hunters that have purchased tags from us, or hunters that are hunting this area that are constantly contacting us. And they're like, okay, here's what I hear. These are the questions I get. What strategies do you use to find elk in the late season, both for cow elk and for bull elk? And there's two different kinds of bull elk that you're chasing. Any bull elk versus a large bull. Okay, on old large bulls. So there's different strategies for those. The second thing is, what if I don't know the area? Where do I start? So that's the second question. And I'm like you, Gil. I get that, and I'm like, I start laughing because it's like, this is 2 weeks or so before, and you're wanting to know where to start. So number one,
How long have you known you're going to hunt there?
yeah, number
2
one,
weeks.
when you know when you're going to start, you get after it, right? And I'm not laughing to make anybody feel bad,
No.
but that's a fact, man. It's just like anything, who is it? Dan Staten always says the separation's in the preparation. There's a plug for elk shape over there, and it's true, man. With that, the third question I get is, are elk still bugling? Can I use calling, or what calls should I use? And when we go to answer that, there's a difference between, when we talk about late season, we're talking about after September. So that could be mid-October, late October. Then I start throwing November in, together. And then you have December, January, like as you're going that, I consider that late heading out like that. And then the last question I get is, what effects does weather have on the elk? So these are a lot that I'm getting there and these types of questions. But Mike Bozarth asked one that kind of goes along with this. And he said, how about late season rifle hunts, but using archery equipment tactics. And so the only thing I would tell you is Mike and everybody else listening, and you guys throw this in if you have something to add to it, because I know, Guy, you probably see some of that where you go to, and I know RC does as well. But what I want to tell you is, if the closer to September and even up to October, the end of October, dude, and sometimes even in the beginning of November, you can use some calling. And now if we're taking archery tactics, I want to say calling is probably the number one tactic for locating animals, because that's all you're wanting to do in those seasons. Now, you can actually get to a point in time like in that early October to mid-October when you have an estrus hit that, yes, you can most definitely get animals that'll start moving towards you, but mostly because they're cowed up, you're going to get bulls that are going to announce where they're at. And your goal as a rifle hunter is not to get as close as possible, because sometimes that can restrict your ability to get a good shot. You know, sometimes you got to think about where they're going to be, using that Onyx, using that base camp, using whatever you have to figure out where those animals are going, where you might have a view to be able to get over those animals. But the sooner you can get eyes on them, you know, so that you have an idea of whether or not you have to make a move, where you can make a move, you know, to be able to get that quality shot, right? The other thing is you can definitely stop them with your calling. You can, you know, set up a shot, or if you have an animal that's bedded down, you can get them to stand up. But here's where I'm going to go away from those archery tactics. And that is, in archery, I like it the thicker, the better. The thicker, the better, because I want it up close and personal, right?
Yes.
But with the rifle, I want the farther and the more open, the better. This is where I don't mind the 100-yard hang up, y'all.
Yeah.
And this is where I want the 100-yard hang up, because that booger is going to stand out there looking for me, and I'm going to get a quality shot on that elk, right? And the other thing is for us, we usually depend on our feet for archery tactics. And I tell people, man, and I don't even bring binos during archery. And I tell guys during the later seasons, it's glassing and it's moving. I mean, using every road you can to check areas, to check for track, get in places to use the glasses, and try to cover country to find those animals. Because where they were spread out in archery, because those bulls take those big herds and they break them up and spread them out, and where elk are spread out, now they are again coming back into these huge herds to where it can be feast or famine. And then you have those big bulls that are actually diving off into areas and trying to get alone because they don't want to be around anything. Or you have your bachelor groups. So they're going to be bachelor groups, single bulls, and large groups of a herd. All right. Those are the type of things you're looking at. But I'm going from thick and using my feet and not getting as much country covered to using as much of the roads and glasses and movement as I can to cover as much country and to look at it. That's my little spiel on that.
Make sure you're wearing some orange too, Mike.
Yeah, plenty of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, and what I've seen here, Joe, and YouTube in the last couple of weeks is we still have bulls bugling, man. You know, they're running in those big herds. There's some bigger boys starting to split off, but they're still screaming. People are, you know, like they're mind blown, but it's still the herd dynamic. They're still, you know, talking to each other. And what are the temps, right? Where you're chasing those animals right now? Are the temps dropping? Here, I think I was 14 out the front door. Everything is starting to drop lower and lower as the snow level drops here. So look
but the difference is you're not going to use your calls to pull them to you. Yeah. You're using those calls to get a location.
Yeah, just locate on them.
Locate and then to stop the animal sometimes to get the shot. Right.
Yeah, in fact, you don't really want to, you know, once you get them located and you're moving in, you pretty much want to shut up.
That's it.
And, you know, use those cow calls. And I saw somebody said that, I think it was Matt was saying that he was thinking about using calf call, you know, to be able to pull them. You know,
A cow, if you got a cow tag, late season cow tag, that calf call is the way to go, bro.
calf calling can pull an elk any time of year. That's one of the
Absolutely.
social things that you can use out there. And Chav and I have pulled herds to us at all times of the year. But I don't tell people to like start going through the woods and doing the same strategies that we do when we are,
Right.
you know, in September. You
Right.
know, you have to use them a little bit different. Like what you're talking about, Matt, being in an open area where, you know, elk are pulling into, you might be able to pull them out there a little sooner. You might be able to pull them from an area that they haven't come into from just by using some of that, you know, lost calf and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you got a cow going away from you and you've spotted her and you need her to do, you know, you want last ditch effort, you start lost calf calling or whatever, that cow will stop a lot of times and she'll come back towards that, right? And that may be all you need is for her to clear one rock or clear one tree and you get a 300 or 400 yard shot at her and get her knocked down, you know. But had you not been able to do that, she probably just kept on booking with the rest of them, you know.
That's right.
So,
Watch
Guy-
that scope magnification though, right? Because a lot of guys will get out there and they'll be cranked up 12, 15, 18, whatever it is. And you mess around
Can't
and you
find her.
call and you can't find her because all you see is this big brown blob. You know, dial that sucker down.
Six.
You
Yep.
know, yeah, get it down.
I
Six
tell-
and then dial
I'd say
it in.
I'd say 8, but 10 sub, depending on that scope.
Yeah.
I tell all of my hunters 4. I mean, I have them dialed down to 4 because we can always dial up to it. But man, if we get in the tree situation, I want them. And there's been a lot of animals over the last 50 years being killed with a 4X scope. So,
Absolutely. 4 and 6 pounds.
And 4.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scopes now that guys are toting that don't go that low.
4. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
that's-
gonna
that's the
jump
biggest
to-
issue.
To a good question here, Joe. Guy, it was your question. What's number one personal goal improvement for next season?
Guy, what did you mean by that, Bo?
Well, you know, because we spend a lot of time talking about what other people are asking, right? And their questions. But as the Success Squad coaches and the bros, we have goals too. And I thought
Definitely.
that there was be some really good insight for folks. If you said, hey, this was my weak point this year, and this is how I'm working on it, and this is what I'm working on, there's a lot of insight coming from, you know, 6 guys that I was posing the question to before I jumped on here.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
No, it's a great question. I can tell you mine's definitely fitness and getting my strength back in my right arm, right? Probably was about, and when I was in elk camp, probably was about 75%. It's probably about 85 now. Was not able to do a whole lot of strenuous stuff while I was healing up with all the surgery that I had in my arm. So mine is definitely show back up to elk camp. A lot more in shape. And look, I know round is a shape, but at the end of the day, show back up, you know, in better shape and being able to assist coaching better with that, right? Look, I'm telling you, I got to a breaking point on that mountain, and I'm telling you, it's just by the grace of God, he jerked me up by my bootstraps. That and the voice of my son telling me, you can't quit, old man. You got to keep going, right? That saved my life. So, and a little bit of understanding my body and how I have to conserve energy. But I don't even get to that if I'm in better shape, right? And not injured. So, guys that are coming off of injuries, man, as we get older, it takes a little bit longer time to heal, right? And you need to make sure that, you know, I had a really cool crew with us that day to help me recover from what I went through. Guy had some really cool stuff that he gave me to take, some high-powered vitamins, some protein powder, man. I felt right as rain in about 6 hours. So anyway, that's my number one goal, is to be a whole lot more prepared physically next year.
Mine are never ending. You know, the one thing that, and I'll just go, it was my question. I asked myself a question that didn't make sense, but you know, my pursuit has been so much about personal growth and grinding and keep going and mental fortitude and being out there with my creator. And to some extent, like a reflection of that this year, to some extent that hinders you. right? Is when you get out there and you have these kind of side goals, if you will. And for me, that's a lot of the focus is like, man, you look at that 11,004 where you can call Joe Giglia from, and you go, I'm gonna get up there, right? Make a phone call to Joe, and then I'm down an hour later because the rain beat me up. But, so I think it's really focusing on the pursuit itself and not all my little outshoots and my personal, vendettas with myself. Because that can cloud the mission.
For sure.
Yeah, I think my personal goal is just to make the people that around me even better. It's been a goal of mine to, I don't know how much my crew notices it, but I take great pride, and I love seeing them grow, and I love seeing them take the lead, and I love seeing them and their confidence taking over and making them into better elk hunters. Because my goal is I want all of them to call it an elk for me, man. So I'm looking forward to that. But when me, Chav, and RC, once you start getting to a certain age up here, man, your goal is to ensure that you're still able to do this stuff up in the hills. Every year is a personal goal, just to be in the right kind of shape, to be able to still chase them, to still make it happen, to do the things that you need to do. So, we keep moving with that.
Says the guy that makes everybody cry following him.
Yeah. I'm telling you what, man. Like I said, I've been on his hip for a long time now, him and Chav, and it was all I could do, stick up with him this year. And we did. I mean, he got me within 12 yards of a bull, and I just needed 3 feet. And we've been partying again. We had a little bit of bad luck, right? But we made our good luck. We actually saw those bulls a long way away, and we actually outran them to the side of a ridge, and actually caught him back down to us, and just had a little bit of bad luck, man. But that's kind of was our whole hunt. Everybody just needed another 3 feet. RC and I, same thing. I mean, RC needed just another 3 feet, and he gets it done. So it was definitely challenging. So we've had such a good string of good luck, and made a lot of good luck too, and then for Joe to get it knocked out on the last day was the coup de grace, for sure. But all of us were so close. Luis, this guy just don't miss. One of the best archers I've ever been around. And, like Joe said, that was the hand of God, though, that helped us when he did miss. But again, I mean, it was tough. Chav sat in a water hole for a full week, hiking in every day. And, last year he saw more elk than anybody did, double the amount of elk everybody did. So it was a weird year, but one that you dive into and go, man, just a few things are different, and we look like heroes, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it only takes a minute for things to go to zero here. I want you guys to still think about some of the goals, and jump in. But Tracy Henry brought up a great point in talking about late season elk hunting. And we tell this to guys, man, when you in the states that get weather, especially, and even as the season goes, those herds and those cows, they're coming down to that lower country. If you get some snow up there, it's going to push them down to where they're getting feed, and they're going to go where they can access it to get down there. And they're going to be in areas that, like, for example, this year, because we didn't have the snow up in the high country very long, and we had really, really green, and it was really good conditions for them, those elk stayed up high for a long time. And they're going to feed on that before they come down to some of that other feed as they go, getting down. So ag areas right now, places down, those parks down in between, especially in some of our areas where between ridges that string back, so you'll have a main ridge that'll have finger ridges coming off of it. A lot of times they'll have small parks that'll run for a long ways in the bottom of those drainages as they level out. And in those areas, you generally get good grass from that moisture sitting in there. And those animals are more secure in some of those side runs like that are in there, and they'll show up in some of those quicker before they show up in some of the bigger areas that are out there. But definitely you'll be able to find them down in some lower places.
You said something that triggered a memory on a previous podcast a long time ago, I think. You mentioned something along the lines of the elk smart enough to optimize where they feed to preserve additional feed for later on. And I think you just mentioned something related to that kind of caught my attention there. Can you expand on that? Because I remember that was super interesting when you mentioned it a while back.
Grinders tuning in, thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Elk Hunting Podcast. Our goal is to share our knowledge and help you flatten that learning curve so that you too can have some of the very same incredible experiences that have given all of us here at ElkBros a lifetime of memories. If you like what you hear or see, you can get all of this information plus so much more from our Base Camp Elk Hunting Training Camp, the first in a series of online courses from our Blue Collar Elk Academy. Our Base Camp Training Camp allows me to use my coaching style and share almost 40 years of elk hunting experiences successfully hunting elk on public lands, as well as over 20 years guiding hunters of all ages and experience levels. This course will be like nothing you have ever experienced in concept and structure, using success-based coaching techniques that will elevate your confidence and skill sets. Our camp will prepare you specifically from that final moment most in your control, those final minutes or seconds the elk is in front of you, backwards through each step and level, allowing you to see, visualize, understand, and relate every coaching point to what lies ahead, the next step, the next thought process, the next success. Because y'all, you've already been there. You know what it looks like. By tapping my 30 years of teaching and coaching experience, our camps are developed considering multiple learning modes with text, visuals, audio, as well as video. And Base Camp will benefit those new to elk hunting all the way to the 10 to 15 year vet. So if you are looking for that one thing to help you fill that tag this year, invest in the most important piece of equipment there is, you and your elk hunting knowledge. You can find the Blue Collar Elk Hunting Academy and the Base Camp Training Camp at ElkBros.com. That's ElkBros.com. Keep dreaming of the screaming, believing in achieving, and most of all, keep grinding. So you take, why aren't these animals feeding on those lower areas first? You know, because think about the conditions of what's going to happen, man. They're not going to eat themselves out of house and home of grass that they're going to need when those conditions push them to it. So they're going to try to eat the grass and the plants that are offered to them in areas that they can survive on until they have to move down into greener pastures. And they're not going to eat themselves out of house and home. You know, that's now. I have seen in areas where you've had really dry drought years when you didn't have good grass years. And man, I tell you what, they eat that grass down to nothing in some places. And that's where they're going to feed on some of those brushy things. They're going to feed on the aspen. When you guys see, if you've ever been in an aspen park and you look at it in dim light, it's so cool because it looks like there is no tree at the bottom of the aspen because the gray blends in with the gray of the morning from all of the tooth marks where the elk have been chewing the bark off the aspen in the wintertime to, you know, using that as part of their feed. It's one of the coolest things, I think, you know, you see that in the early mornings up there. You get an aspen that falls down, you know, they're going to chew the heck out of that, you know, and take advantage of that feed where they can. Now, one thing that's different about that, the big bulls, those big bulls will not necessarily, especially the big old bulls, they don't necessarily push down like the rest of that herd because they don't need as much feed as the rest of the herd does. They can stay in some areas and survive until, and they'll push snow up to their chest sometimes before they actually get moved down. You know, and most people will never locate them and find them because they don't think those animals are staying in there, but they'll stay in an area that's just not very big, that's providing them everything that they need.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense, Luis?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just pretty amazing how nature works, right? And how smart these animals can be and understand their environment.
Watch a bison herd. A bison herd does the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. All grazing animals do.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Joe, you had brought up, your RC and Chav's age. I didn't bring it up, but Richard Flock in the group there says that I'm 66, haven't pulled my bow back in a while. Went out to pull it and I couldn't, having to drop from 60 to 55 in order to pull. I'm not a big guy and really noticed that I have to practice all year due to aging.
Yep.
Okay, so I can't talk about the pulling the bow back thing, but I will say, yeah, Rich, because for me, the older I get, I do see some degeneration in how my pin and my target appears through my sight.
Definitely.
And if
Most
I
definitely.
slack a couple weeks, I see a difference.
Yeah.
So it's like
My
constantly,
astigmatism gets worse.
yeah, keeping my eye trained to look through that sight, to look through that pin at my
It's a great
target.
point,
So
guy. Great
but-
point.
I'm sure that these elderly gentlemen may have some more in terms of pulling the bow back.
I after Joe went through all of his surgery and all this stuff, or he didn't go through surgery, but I picked up I picked up a set of they're just bungee stretchies.
Yeah.
And I started real slow because I was having trouble pulling 50. And I just started pulling it correct. That was the main thing. I built that muscle up and now I'm comfortable pulling 60, 65 pretty easy. So, I mean, that's one thing that I could say that really helped a lot is using that bungee and just do it slow. Just build yourself up.
And not only doing it in one way, you need to add the additional exercises that are going to strengthen the areas around. So, if you guys are interested in that, I can actually post some exercises that Doc had me doing, man, over at Mountain Physio. And if you haven't checked them out, they're fantastic. I honestly thought I was going to need shoulder surgery this year, and from the exercises he gave me, I'm pulling better than I ever have. I have less, I don't have any more night pain. I don't know how many of you are having night pain when you sleep on a shoulder. That'll tell you something right there. And that's issues with ligaments that are going on. And there's things that you can do to heal that. And it's all about blood flow. You get blood flow from using muscles. So when we start getting sedentary and start doing that, we stop getting blood flow to areas. We get relaxed. We're watching the TV more, that boob tube, doing different things. We're on the computer more. But, you can keep yourself in a lot better shape just by staying and using those muscles, man.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm 53 in September. I was 53 in September the 12th.
Really, just 53?
53, yeah.
That's
and
all?
I did not pull my bow back from March 22nd till September the 1st. Okay. I couldn't. I was injured and couldn't pull it back. They had to do distal bypass bicep surgery, and they had reattached it. And on September 1, I didn't even dial my bow down. I walked out there and grabbed a hold of it and drew it back. But look, it's not like I just went cold turkey. On my therapy and everything, I was pulling back 20 pounds, 25, 30, and mimicking all that with bands and pulleys in the weight room, right? So I got myself back to that. But look, when I latched a hold of it that first time, I went, wow, man, this is where it really, I've got pretty strong back muscles and shoulder muscles. So I use my back to draw my bow more than probably any muscle that I use ever, right? As far as drawing your bow back, I don't use a lot of bicep and tricep. So I use a lot of my back muscles and lats to pull and push it back. But that's how I was taught to draw my bow, right? So and then Doc, Mountain Physio, he made a statement that if you're not drawing your bow in a certain position, you're actually having problems hurting your shoulder. So I watched a little bit of that, and I've always drawn my bow with my elbow up. So I've been lucky with that and not having to. Now, a lot of times we're sitting in a ground blind or we're sitting in a tree stand like I was with Luis, and I draw my bow from the bottom side just so I don't make a lot of big movement. But then I got to get back to form, right? when you're not at when you're not at your physical fittest self where you're really strong, dude, you can really struggle from that. I watched Joe having that shoulder problem, hog hunting, trying to draw his bow from a kneeling position,
Or rub my entire blind.
position. Yeah, and he poked the hole, severed the blind top and everything. I mean, he just couldn't get his bow back. So don't feel like you're alone, brother. I mean, at the end of the day, this is real, and you really got to 100%. Stay up. I would, shoot every couple of weeks, shoot every week. I mean, I don't know. I can tell I'm going to have to start. I used to not have to shoot a lot at all, but I can tell Guy brought up a really good point of me seeing through the peep sight and stuff like that. That changes, right? I noticed that this weekend I shot a lot more. I really shot well. But it was because I was used to seeing that sight picture,
There's nothing wrong with dropping that poundage. As long as you're in a legal poundage, you can drop that poundage, adjust your setup to where you're comfortable and physically you're able to go out there and manage that situation, right? If you have a long hold, if you're struggling to hold, the 60 pounds or the 55 pounds, then drop it. Just make sure you're within, the legalities of your fishing game in your state. And if you have to adjust arrows, weight and things like that, get with Luis.
Look, my son Logan is
talk about that.
He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, and can pull a house down. And he only pulls 57 pounds, man. But he likes it because he doesn't have to make big movements in a tree stand, stuff like that. And he absolutely throttles animals at 57 pounds.
Hey, Chav, you went from, we can remember when you were coming back after your bout with cancer, man, there was a point you just weren't able to even do anything with your bow to where you were actually shooting again and doing that. What was the big change for you?
Well, I think, I lost a lot of upper body strength when I was going through rehab, but I started using the bands first. And again, you as you get older, you got to do something every day if possible.
Yeah.
And just be persistent at it, grind it out. The last couple of years I've been eligible to use a crossbow, but my goal, talking about what would you like to do to improve, my goal this year is to build up my upper body strength where I can use a bow. I enjoy that a lot more. Of course, I haven't shot the crossbow yet. Haven't had that opportunity. So we'll see what the future brings.
This year was the first year you used a crossbow. Last year you had your bow, right?
Last year you shot your bow. You shot your bow at a bow.
Yeah, I did shoot my bow. Come to think of it, but
when he came last year in February, he was set up with a crossbow as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's what he's thinking. He's thinking too. The two opportunities where he had the bow. Crossbow.
But dude, man, and that's the thing is, every time he puts a crossbow in his hands, nothing shows up, man.
Nothing shows up. Nothing shows up. No, but look, it's scientifically proven. Like after your 40s, your muscle mass is going to start to decay.
That's BS, bro. I'm 40.
Deteriorate.
I'm just getting more.
Don't be putting them noodles up.
More and more, bro.
Don't put them
That's your case. Those
are called bingo arms.
Sure.
I'm 70 years old and I have gobble arms.
To have cannons, bro. You got to have guns, son.
Yes.
So the truth of the matter is, you need to start. It's not just cardio, and I had this conversation with Manano. It's not just cardio going forward. Yeah, cardio is great. Don't get me wrong, but you need to start, strengthening. And for strengthening, you need weights, and that's what's going to keep you from your muscles to stay in shape. And so definitely, look, you just gotta train, and you gotta train with weights, and that's going to help your overall health.
And I'll throw this in. It doesn't even have to be weights. It can be body weight. It can be body
resistance.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your body weight's big resistance, right? I mean, if you take a
Absolutely.
look at gymnasts, they never touch a weight. It's all body resistance, and that's how they get stronger. Push 1,000 push-ups a day. I mean, it's crazy the stuff that gymnasts do to be so strong. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. You got to get stronger. But like Guy said, you ain't got to pull back 65 pounds to kill an elk. I'm telling you straight up, man.
But I want you to
lot of
notice,
people-
man. I want y'all to notice the one that hasn't said anything about goals, and the one that hasn't said anything about having to stay stronger, and the one that is just like, he's like, yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
No, I tell you what, my goal is. My goal is to find a
man.
better.
My
My
goal,
goal,
I
is to
already
find a
said
better hunting partner.
My goal, I already said it. I
So,
read the
so
guy's
Logan is going to be the
question.
best substitution, the best new hunting partner.
About
I'm
Logan,
gonna have.
man, he popped in
No,
here
my-
and said,
you know my
he told
goal,
Manano, he
guys.
said, I got you back, Manano. I'll call
Yeah, and I
you.
respond
Logan
to him.
doesn't know what he's talking about. He
what
will
is
No,
your goal,
realize once he
definitely,
gets up there.
definitely,
What
honestly,
is your
definitely,
goal, Manano? I want to hear it.
my goal is improve my calling skills.
Oh, okay.
That's my number one.
Yeah,
I
buddy.
mean, it's
There you go.
not my personal goal, it's a goal. My internal personal goal is enjoy the most every time that I go out and hunt memories.
Exactly.
That's what I hunt for. That's and I know probably Guy or other guys don't agree with my point because they're
Everybody gets that, Manana, but they're talking about true goals, not just like,
And that's
Why you
like
saying me? I didn't
rainbows
disagree with
and
anybody.
unicorns. And
no,
Everybody gets that. We all want good memories.
Called
We
you out,
get it.
G.
But they're talking
I didn't
serious
say a
stuff here.
word.
That's my
I don't know
nano
what-
things.
I didn't disagree with you, bro. I love that.
Guy was fixing to break out the violin,
I'm
bro.
telling you, it's true, bro. That's true. It's my personal goal.
Hey, we want rainbows and unicorns and pretty flowers. And it's like,
That's
geez.
why I don't get mad when you miss.
Yeah, I love to see the butterflies and take beautiful pictures. And I get it, dude.
Bro,
That's
I'm
fine, but
hunting
that's-
since I was born.
Oh, Lord have
No.
mercy.
I don't have
gonna-
anything.
I'm going to take us to another question. man.
Please.
Keep it in line there.
All right. Hey,
Please.
so Jeff Barlow from Sneak Tech, Jeff was here early. I'm not sure if Jeff is still with us now, but he says, how do you locate bulls that are quiet because of hunting pressure or predators? And I hear this all the time, and really, I truly believe that I think 95% of the people out there that are hunting during the archery season deal with this issue, and they don't deal with it well. Because especially we think that one of the best times to hunt elk is early season, right? So we're talking about, for you, some of you guys might be starting in August, but we're September 1st to like September 14th. We love that time of the season. That's where we get to hunt those animals before they've ever, that's the dumbest they're going to be all year, right? They haven't had anybody calling at them, really anybody pushing on them. And it's a great time to actually get a great bull during that time. It's a great time to have animals come into you. But you had better be ready to handle animals that are more quiet, right?
Yes. Yes.
So so many guys go through and they throw out location bugles. And if they do not get a response, they're lost.
Mhm.
They're done. So what I like to tell you, Jeff, is this. When elk are quiet, I don't necessarily try to locate them. I try to get them to locate me,
Yep.
right? That's the difference. And, and I was I was listening to a piece on Guy's podcast. Him and I did a show together, and I was talking about people, and their talk, their calling. And I think I kind of misspoke a little bit because I talk about how people really they don't really work on their calling, and they're not able to really make a lot of sounds and stuff. It's a little bit incorrect because I think guys are able, I think most people can do a location bugle, and I think they can do a cow call, right? But one thing that I did find out by doing, we do a new kind of elk competition at the Hunt Fest, the Western Hunt Fest, and what we do is a scenario calling elk competition. In other words, when we're talking about scenarios, you guys talk about scenarios all the time that you have, that there's a bull, it's September 15th and he was up on a hill and all he was doing was grunting at me. And, you give that scenario. Well, what we do is we create a scenario with our calling, doing elk things that are going to make elk want to come to us. And what I found is that because people do not understand what elk are saying or why they're calling or what their calls mean, they don't know or understand a scenario. Like they don't understand, how to a bedded bull scenario, an advertising bull scenario, a cow in heat scenario, a rut fest type scenario. So these are different scenarios that we try to paint the picture by playing the parts of elk doing these different elk sounds that they do for those scenarios that will draw animals into us. And by understanding those and getting in an area where elk are, and why do you know elk are there? Either by the sign, either you've reverse engineered from where they're going to water and feed up to where their bedding is, and you're finding those fresh tracks, or you're smelling them, or you've been on tracks that you're seeing that's going into an area. You know that elk are in a particular area, but if you were to just give a location bugle, you get diddly.
Yep.
So what you have to do is you change that tactic from getting them to respond and you cutting the distance to them to maybe you getting into where they're at and getting them to cut the distance to you. So that's a totally different thought process right there. But that's one of the things that we do well.
Yeah, it is, Joe. And look, we lived that this year, in our hunt success crew. We actually went to an area and kind of saturated an area, but we were up against some really hard lines where we couldn't go, right? So we knew that if we were there, it was raining, it was pretty foul weather. I knew that I've been in that scenario many other times, man. And I was just going to send out a location bugle, a few cow calls, and then make it sound like my own little elk herd right there. And so we're just casting that out, and lo and behold, they came and found us. It was one bull and he was looking for the party. And there were some things this year that was a little bit different too, Joe, for us. And I think every year you'll find out what little wrinkle in your calling will have that effect on an animal, right? This year for me, it was that soft chuckle. That little soft chuckle would gain confidence in animals to want to join the party. It wasn't just a lost cow call, which I did some of that too, but that soft chuckle was the convincing part to keep that bull's attention and have him want to come find the party, right? And it was really, it was really light, but that bull tried to leave 3 times, me and Tom, and he was just coming looking for the party. They all want to be social and see who's over there and this, that, and the other. So we just kind of played up to that scenario because we couldn't go much further. We were up against a hard line barrier and wasn't like we could keep rolling out of that unit, so
well, what you're doing though is you're doing something that's not the same old rodeo. And you guys think about this, man. A lot of these elk, especially now, we have so many people that are going out and they're throwing out calls already, throwing out location bugles in August. They're just wanting to hear animals, or they're wanting to practice their calling. They want to see a response, or they're out there the week before, the day before their season actually opens. And I was talking to a hunter about that today. But they're hearing all of this stuff. And then, man, everybody hits the hills and everybody's making the same calls. So when you start using things that's not the same old rodeo, when you're using those low audible elk sounds, when you're using the raking, when you're using the light chuckles and the little moans, the huffs, when you're using those types of sounds, it's not the same deal, man. And the other thing I want to tell people is just because, and always remember this, because you're not hearing a response from another bull's bugle does not mean that elk are not responding to you.
Yep.
You might not be close enough to hear the response, or you might not be waiting long enough for them to respond by actually coming to you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that happen in that early season.
Yeah, that bull never said a word. Come right on in there.
No.
Never said a word.
Joe, you brought up the podcast. I'm not shamelessly plugging, But one of the things that we talked about on there and that you said is, is your repertoire, right? The more you run through this, if you start this now, the more you run through this, the ready you are for season. So you get out there and you got 5 trucks that are 70 foot apart and everybody's doing the same thing and you bounce off of that. Well, then you're able to open up your tool bag, reach in there and try X, Y, and Z if the other stuff isn't working, whereas everybody else is typically A and B. Right. So having a strong calling repertoire is huge.
Yeah, I'll never forget. Tom was like, "You're gonna do what?" I said, "We're just gonna throw those calls out there and let them marinate." He looked at me like a calf looking at a new gate, and he was like, "Marinate? I hadn't heard that." I said, "Well, I'm telling you, man. Look," I said, "I've been with R.C. Knox, the great Carl Gamage. I've sat under oak trees calling bulls in for people with, muzzle loaders. And I'm telling you, a day like today, we're going to make it happen doing that because we can't go nowhere else, man. We're hung up right here. I mean, this is as far as we can go." So it was awesome, man. And just doing something a little bit out of the norm, right, Joe?
Absolutely, man. And what I'd like to do is I want to read a scenario here because it actually hits on a lot of different things. It's taking us back to September. This is from Albuquerque. He says, "I have a scenario question. It's September 1st to 14th. Sound familiar? Bulls would usually respond to first location bugle. They never responded to any cow calls except last few days of the hunt. I would move in on location bugles, but they would shut up if I advanced. I tried waiting them out and the occasional bugle to get a direction, but they never closed the distance. In other words, the elk never came into them." And now he kind of says here something a little different. He says, "What is the move for these pre-rut educated bulls?" Okay, this was my first elk hunt with a bow. I still had several close encounters on some awesome bulls, but 80 yards was all these bulls were willing to risk. The decoy advice you guys had given was great, but carrying a decoy while solo hunting is quite tough with a bugle tube that I'm trying to keep quiet around my neck. And of course, you still have to range for yourself. Any tips to keep your bugle tube quiet would be appreciated. Said, "I range trees in advance to take one more step out of the equation, but man, solo hunting elk is not easy." And so I'm going to pull out some things here that he said. Number one, what is the move for these pre-rut bulls? He talks about how they would not, they would respond, and once you got close, they weren't responding again. Now, they weren't responding to a bugle, so that's something we can talk about. He also said he had some awesome encounters with bulls at 80 yards, but they were willing not to come any closer. And he talks about a decoy being too tough to carry. I'll just tell you this. For that predator decoy mounts on the front of your bow. We're going to solve that one right away there for you. It's a great decoy to use even for a solo hunter. And it said that it's tough to keep a bugle tube quiet around my neck, and of course you still have to range yourself. And if you're using a bat style tube, yes, it is. Well, what we use a flexible tube like this. And we have that tube right around here. And what we do is we have that tube where we're able to just pull it right up here. If I'm on my knees and I have my bow here and it's down on the ground, anything I do is calling behind me. And that's one reason a lot of times that those elk hang up out there at 80 yards from you. All right.
You would just push and pull it, man, as you need it.
So I have it right here, every movement. And when I call now, I'm calling behind me. A lot of times those elk hang up at 80 yards because you're calling towards the animal. Never call towards the animal once they've moved in like that. And the problem is to call behind you, there's a lot of movement with that big bat tube. So if you have a flexible just like this, now when I call, if that animal's starting to come in, all I got to do is push it down just like this. It's still right there. And all of it's hidden by my bow in front of me where I'm able to draw. I don't even have to do much with it. Just like that. I've reached down and I've grabbed it and I've actually turned and steered an animal coming into me. So that's real key. And it's light. It doesn't make a lot of noise. It gets right around the back of your pack. It's a good way to go if you're struggling, especially if you're a solo hunter. Look, I don't care what you use when you're calling together as a team. If Guy and I are hunting together, he can use that bat back behind me all he wants, man, because he can move and he can make things happen for me. But when you're a solo hunter,
yeah.
and you're trying to bring that animal in close, if that animal, once he gets into 80 and you're using a bat, you're stuck. You're stuck. So you need something else that you'll be able to do to throw calls back behind you. So that's something that you can do with that.
Can I chime in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. But
So as a predominantly solo elk hunting guy, I already know if I'm going to the woods with something noisy. I already know how my bat's going to work, if I'm using my bat holder or if I'm using it over my shoulder. You got to work that stuff out before season, right? You can't go into the elk woods and have these little glitches and have to deal with them, because those little glitches, they add up and they throw you off your game and you're not focused on the mission at hand. So you gotta get out and you gotta put that pack on, and you have to be okay or uncomfortable at the range looking like the freak guy in all his gear 2 months before season, and really go through those scenarios. Get that stuff worked out, guys, prior to season. It's you can't go, especially solo, you can't go in there with that mess.
You know, Joe, one of the things that he's dealing with too is 80 yards. I mean, what's his setup like? Because if they're hung up at 80 yards, they're at a stop and scan spot most of the time. If he gets inside of that, you know, he's 40 yards a lot closer. So, and he's shooting at those bulls.
Yeah.
Always remember too, man, if they're 80 yards and they're talking back to you, you can get right on them, dude, and go right at them. You know, I mean, you got nothing to lose, you know, when they're hung up. Go make your way. You can bugle your way right into them. There's a lot of things that you can do, Jens, but having a bull hang up at 80 yards generally is on us and our setup.
what Gilbert's talking about is this, and we've talked about it a lot of time, is a stop and scan. An elk wants to confirm visually. So if that elk is in an area where he should see the other elk making that noise, then they're going to stop and they're going to look for that other elk. They should be able to see it. And if they don't see it, then that's a red flag for them, man. Now, if your setup's in a situation where you're using either vegetation or you're using terrain so that that animal has to come up and over or around something or through something before he hits that stop and scan spot, you'll see them. They'll come through brush and they'll stick their head through there and they'll turn and they'll look, man, just like that at you. And that's where they go through that doorway, that stop and scan location. I think there was one other thing on there.
He said something about it, looking at the trees and using his rangefinder earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, that's knowing where, you know, for me, guys, knowing where 40 yards is a big deal. Once I know what 40 yards looks like, or 50, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I can cut that in half and I don't even need anything 20 yards and in, right? Like, you know, when Bruce asked Joe, you know, bulls at 8 yards, and he asked Joe, what pin do I use? Joe said, all of them. You know what I mean, dude? At the end of the day, dude, you just got to know. For me, it's that 40-yard mark for me, understanding anything past that, I'm going to use my rangefinder. And I can't stress to you guys enough, man, don't shoot at bulls if you don't know how far they are. Don't. You're just going to be sadly disappointed, right? Do your homework in your setup, range trees and bushes in front of you that are 40, 50, 60 yards. And once you understand where 40's at, then you can really develop that, you know, 20 to 40 yards and get in there and go, well, that's half of that 20 to 40. So that's 30, right? I mean, you can really get there. And our bows nowadays, unless you're shooting a 300,000 grain arrow like Luis does, they're pretty flat shoot. But at the end of the day, man, it's so important for you to know your distance. And man, that takes practice too, huh? RC, it takes going out there and being in the woods and going, how far you think that is, man? And you range it and you, well, shoot, I was off of that. And a lot of that'll depend on your cover too. If you got real dark cover and shooting through corridors and stuff, it's going to always look longer and bigger, right? So get used to doing that, and your hikes in the woods and stuff like that. Get used to ranging things in your mind and understand. When you can start seeing 40 yards in front of you, you're going to get a whole lot more lethal with.
And
with
the
being
woods
able to
are
kill things.
the woods are super deceiving too.
Yeah.
You know, this year, every once in a while, Manano and I will, you know, say, okay, so how far is that pine tree over there? And then I'll take a guess, right? And you know, I'll be way off, you know, and then you'd range and you're like, wow, because you have a little downhill and then it gets to a little trenasse. Yeah, you see, you like how I threw that one in there, Beto.
Like it, baby.
Yeah, you should be proud. And then
I
it
am
went
proud.
up, it went up on the other side, and then it just completely changes the perspective to what actually the distance is. Now, to your point, you know, it's great, especially if you're in a setup, to kind of range around you, right? And get comfortable, just get a mental map of what your contour lines are, right? Western contoured lines. You like that?
There you go, buddy. There you go.
Yeah.
Shameless.
And so
Oh my gosh. He's trying to make points, ain't he?
you see how good I'm getting good at this, RC.
Contour lines. Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a great name for a podcast.
You know,
bro.
you know what I
Oh,
mean?
wouldn't it though?
Yeah,
Western
man.
For a
contour?
podcast, boys.
Just so good, so good. But anyhow, so my point is also understand your equipment. See, in my case, you know, when that elk came out, I completely forgot that my rangefinder already accounts for inclination. And so when I measured the distance, I pegged that elk for about 30 yards because I had measured a 40-yard behind it and a 20-yard in front of it. So I figured it should be around 30 yards. And then I thought, well, I need to take some yardage off because I'm shooting downhill, and I shot way low. And so, you know, if your rangefinder already accounts for distance, you got to know that, because then you don't have to compensate. See, I basically compensated over the compensation that was already given to me by the rangefinder. So it's important to quote that. Lesson learned for me, big lesson learned.
Manano, do you have techniques? I mean, how hard is it for you to judge distance as a pin shooter? Do you have any special techniques?
No, I'm constantly ranging.
Constantly ranging.
Constantly. Every time that I get a point, I range. That's my first step. And I always challenge Luis, hey, how far is that tree? And how far is that? We got that game going on 24/7 in the woods. But my very first step is just range my surroundings. And then I forgot my range finder. So
one of those, everybody does that. The problem that I have, and this is one of my success squad coaching points, right, is that when we do that, we're not paying attention to it. We're recording 18, 32, 28, 41, right? But we're not sitting there and going, that's what 18 looks like. That's what 28 looks like. And recording that visually, right? So when we go back to it later, now I can add all my 18s up and put my freaking pin on that tuft of hair and go, oh, I've been there, done that. That's 18 yards. I remember that, right? And Manano has it perfectly, but make sure that you're recording that stuff, guys. When you go to the range, Joe, myself, and Adam in camp, we played a little no range target dance, right? We set the target out. I think we went out to like 70 yards. And in as close as
I got another
and we couldn't range. Joe's like, no ranging. So what we did is we just went and we shot, and then we played some other stuff with it. But it's a really good practice. It's a lot of fun, right? And it really gets you dialed in on judging that range. But you have to make those mental, I call them mental recordings. For me, that's how I do it, right? Because I replay it to myself as I'm in the field, and I'm like, okay, there's an animal coming in, boom, 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 boom. And I may every now and again just go and verify that if I have the time, but more times than not, it's just the mental playback.
No ranging 3D shoots are great for that.
Most of the people are good ranging at 20 yards. I mean, their judgment will be good. So my strategy, I always try to be accurate at 20 yards, and then I double it.
Yeah.
That's
Correct.
what I range, and then 20 yards is from here to there, and then I double. It's 30 yards, 35 yards, and you will be around that. So
Right.
that's my
Yeah,
procedure.
if you know what 20 yards looks like, it's easier to go, okay, that's 10 yards from the 20. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
and when you're hunting with a partner, hopefully they can help you. Standing there, they could call out a number or something like that. I actually had Chav with me one time. A bull had jumped a barrier and was standing there, and I said, "How far?" And he goes, 18 yards. And I looked back at him, and I'm like, 18, the bull's like a half a mile in front of us. And I'm like, 18 yards. I look back at Chav. I'm like, 18 yards. I said, "You're going to have to do that again." I'm at full draw, guys. I'm at full freaking draw. And I look back at 18, and he's going tick, 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 tick,
Click, 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 click.
57. When I said it, I'm like, I know that bull's over at 50 or more, and he goes 57. Sent it, man. But I mean, 18, it freaked me out. I'm like,
But look, and again, so that technique of the 20-yard and doubling it works great. It's a lot easier in our heads when the terrain is flat.
yeah.
But when you start adding,
Elevation.
tree tunnels, changes in elevation, you're looking from one ridge to the other. That really messes your perception up.
So what happens when the battery dies in the rangefinder and you forgot to pack the battery? What
Yeah,
happens
no,
when
You got a
that's tough.
Manano, the Bora
Yeah, I
battery.
mean, what are you
that's
doing,
fine.
right? And there's so many things that can go wrong with our electronics.
That
For
happened
sure,
to,
and look,
that happened to somebody.
That's why I want to be good at 40 and in, right? I'm probably
RC?
not shooting past that if I don't have a rangefinder, though.
I think that what solves all the problems is if a guy will take a judo point, take it out in the field, and shoot it.
Yeah,
And you're going to go, "Oh man, that was a little further than what I thought." Then you range it and you go, "Oh, okay." Or then you get to where that rangefinder, that you got, sits
stays
in
in
that
your
pocket
yeah,
and it stays there.
yeah. Get
Because you're exactly how far that is because you've been shooting that distance. And it's just like you said, in the trees, in the tunnels, where it's dark, where all that stuff is, you just learn to shoot that kind of stuff.
That's right.
When I killed that bull last year in Colorado, Brendan called out the distance, but I figured the bull for 50 and he said 53. And I mean, got my 50-yard pin already settled on him. I'm pretty confident I'm right, but I'm not letting that arrow go unless I probably have a confirmation. And when he said 53, I sent it, man, it was gone. But
I
again,
think-
understanding what that distance is a big deal.
And I think the more that you train yourself for it and practice for it, and then here's the other thing is that when you get in the situation, you have to trust yourself for it. I mean, it's one of those things that a lot of times we convince ourselves out of. We actually talk ourselves out
Yes,
of
sir.
a distance when our body is telling us the correct thing.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that you have to practice. And like Guy said, when we play that game, Chav and I used to play horse all the time, where one person had to follow the other one with the shot, just like in basketball. We would do that with archery all the time, from different places, different angles, different heights, from our knees, from standing up, from different things, just to work all of that stuff. And it's not only fun, but it prepares you for things. In fact, we did this one time where I actually climbed up in a tree to do a shot, and Chav's just a little bit shorter than me. So Chav gets up in the tree to do the shot, and there's one of these limbs that are in his way, and he's right over top of my head because I was like, "Oh, I got to move this tree out of his way so he can make the shot." So he's right above me with his bow, and the last thing I remembered going, "I hope he doesn't shoot me in the back of the head," went, "Wow." I'm like this, man, and I reach up and I'm bleeding on the back of my head, and I'm going, "You shot me, man." And Chav's bow's way up in the air. And what happened was remember we had the egg cams,
Yeah.
some of these cams
Oh,
are like that.
yeah.
Well, when it pulled up, that cam went down and it chopped me right in the top of the noggin.
That's that tomahawk cam, huh?
Oh, yeah, tomahawk cam. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can get a little dangerous, I guess. It does. What we're going to do here, guys, is this is just about time for us to close out.
Joe, I wanted to give a shout out to Armando with the bow hitch. He's on with us tonight, man. Guys, if y'all have not gone to Armando's website at the bow hitch, y'all got to do that. Why? Because carrying your bow sucks. That's why, right? So you got to go check out Armando and the boys at the bow hitch. If you guys are Western hunters and even deer hunters, man, I use mine quite a bit. So at the end of the day, you got to go check out those guys, man.
Hey, and I think Mondo's giving out 20 free to the guys on this chat here. Just mention
Armando.
The last person that shows up has to give free gear. Armando, we're so proud of you, dude.
He's gonna send me the bill.
I'll tell you what, every one of us uses the bow hitch, and there are some of us here that were reluctant to try it, and everybody here agrees it was a total game changer. I
Total
truly,
game changer.
it's going to be. I think it's going to be one of those items that's like your stabilizer. It has to be on your bow because
Right.
it's that much of an impact.
It's a must have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to answer one thing that I want to say because somebody was talking about 3D targets to help you with some of that shot placement and things about 3D. And one thing I want to remind everybody as well is that the only thing about a 3D target is it's always got like, you got your 10 ring and you got your kill zone and everything. And when you're broadside, and a lot of that is trying to put you in that, that golden triangle. Well, that's great for target practice and learning to place your arrows. But for us, that is not good shot placement. And the other thing is when you practice 3D, it doesn't matter what the angle is, you're always shooting at that same part on the shoulder. And what you got to get used to doing is if you are on a quartering away shot, is you're going to have to shoot outside of the scoring zone to really hit what would be killing an animal. You got to think about what you're going through in that anatomy to get both lungs. If you were on a live animal at a quartering away shot to hit right there in tight behind that shoulder, you're going to take out one lung, it's going to come out the other side of the chest, and that animal's going to go possibly for weeks. If it doesn't go in a couple of days. So just
Joe, Silvano Munoz asked that. Silvano Munoz had a question of, on shot placement on elk, depending on the position of the elk. I know Joe and Guy discussed it on their podcast. What's you guys' personal opinion on specifics of where you would place your arrow? And I told him in the type, I said, man, you got to go to our shot placement podcast. It's one of the very best. Joe covers it again in the base camp model for that's available on our webpage, but on our YouTube channel, he actually has an overlay of the elk's anatomy and shows you right where we shoot our bulls. And, RC, Joe, Chav can attest the last 3 bulls that we've killed have went a combined about 25 yards, man. And I mean, piled up. We watch them fall in sight, so we gotta, and what clued me into where I shoot them is my daughter shooting her bull. I've said this 1,000 times. She shot a bull her second time. She shot him and she hit him a little back and a little high as center, and blood flew out of that animal. He was dead in 13 seconds, So
you go up that leg. And like Guy and all of us know, we never have a truly broadside animal. No. So that's something you always got to take in consideration. Like I said on that incredible Western Contours podcast, most guys look from the wrong end to their shot. They look from the head down to the place they're going to shoot. You need to go from the legs up when you're going to do your shot. That way you see where those leg placement is. If you're looking at an animal and you're seeing this, where this is behind, you got
That's
a
a
coring
nasty
away.
animal.
You see where they disappear? You
I
got a
don't know that we
broadside.
want to see much of that, Joe. You can.
want
put
none of
that
that
away.
Don't do that
animal,
again,
bro.
Joe.
It's just, yeah, let's
don't
not.
do that
Let's
again.
not use
Rhett
that
might
as
think
an
that's a
example.
cool animal, but that ain't no cool animal, bro.
Just let's not.
Gross.
Yeah.
Hey, I think that's a great way to end the show.
Oh man, we just getting warmed up, Joe.
That's a great way to
I
end.
need to get
the show.
another one.
And
Oh my goodness. Hey Gil, why don't you close us out, guys?
Oh man,
Yeah.
you don't want to go to one more question, man. We ain't got nobody else in the house. You know, Bryson Bursey did send something that said, what mistake do you see new elk hunters consistently make, and what is the solution? And I think we've touched
People
on that today.
Not drawing.
Do what? Do what,
People-
Manana?
That's
People
a
don't-
series of podcasts.
Yeah, it could be a series, but I think most new elk hunters consistently don't understand how to call. That's what I'm gonna tell you straight up.
Yeah,
And when you
the
learn
second
how to
one,
do that, it will absolutely change your game, right, Joe?
Yeah, and I've got one a little bit different that I think they consistently make. And I think they give up too early, leave too soon.
Yep.
They're all gung ho in the first 3 days. And then if things haven't gone their way and they haven't had elk running over them, they give up too soon after waiting 350 days to get out there instead of grinding it out the full time and hunting
That's right.
every day like it's your only day and your last day. And that's what I think is the biggest and most consistent mistake that I see from people out there in the woods.
That's right. You
Absolutely.
listen to that episode of Western Contours, you'll get more of what Joe just said right there.
No doubt.
Another
Go-
plug.
Yeah, they can. And hey, guy, congrats again, bro, on the Carbon TV. Let everybody
thank you,
know you
brother.
can see you now on Carbon TV, brother.
Yeah, if you guys are listening to Western Contours, go over to the Carbon TV app. It's free. It's amazing. You don't have to pay anything. You just get on there, load the app on your phone, and there's a ton of outdoor content on there for your listening and viewing pleasure. We're over there with Western Contours. Appreciate the support over there, and you'll see Joe and the boys, throughout the year on Wapiti Wednesdays as I load up over there. So.
Man, what an awesome podcast. I love doing the live stuff, man. I love getting off a little unleashed and making Joe cringe just a little bit. When I found that the GD was in the house, I wanted him to join us. He was
Thanks,
an
brother.
instrumental part of us in our coaching staff this year. And, he's part of our ElkBros family. So I wanted him to join us. And if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe, rate, and review us. You got to go to Apple Podcast or iTunes to review us. And you can check out more elk hunting content at ElkBros.com. And please like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's really how we get these views up and stuff like that. And just a reminder, if any of our listeners would like their questions answered on the show, just send your questions to info@elkbros.com. And like we say down here in the Lone Star State, husbands, kiss your wives. Wives, kiss your husbands. Keep your broadhead sharp and your powder dry. And we'll see you next week right here on Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
Absolutely. Peace, everybody.
And for all our grinders out there, here's some more music from our brother Tony Wintrip to close out the show.
I got my rigging pants on, Romeo's walk me out to my Chevy. It's always honking at me, knows when it's Friday night. We're going booze cruising. My cooler in the back, baby in the front. My buddy and his wife, they're all cuddled up in the backseat. Should have been a cowboy playing ain't nobody losing. So put on that shine, girl, we're going booze cruise. Going booze cruise, leaving all our troubles behind. I got that cold bush light and some sweet red wine. And when that sun comes up over the mountaintop and those bloodshot eyes are trying to wake up, we all knew it. We're cruising for a cruise. But we'll do her again next Friday. We're going booze cruising. Going booze cruising, leaving all our troubles behind. I got some cold bush light and some sweet red wine. And the sun comes up over the mountaintop and those bloodshot